Thank you very much, Doctor, for sharing in-depth knowledge on moral economies. What do you have to say concerning organized economic models that emerged from Africa before the most popular Western economic models?
Economics is amazing, it's interesting. There was a trajectory, there was a flow, a lovely flow over the centuries, right? And so, from moral economic core, right, I'll start to move gradually into, some of the other models that emerged slowly and gradually, and that worked effectively in the regions where you have them. Let me start with the Jewish economic, what I call the Jewish moral economic theory, right? And we're going to keep it very simple, right? Accumulation of wealth, right? The Jewish economic model is based on accumulation of wealth, accumulation of a lot of wealth, whether it was before or now, accumulation of a lot of wealth, right? I'll keep it simple like that. You can interpret it whichever way you like, right? Protection of private property. Do not forget the works of Ibn Khaldun, protection of property, of private property. Even today, right now, in our economies, especially struggling economies, so if you like, emerging economies, some call it third world, if you like, but in those economies, you still see that there are challenges around protection of property, of private property, even till today. There's still a problem around that. So for Jewish economic model, protection of private property, participation in the creative process. You see, here's an understanding, right? The Jews believe that there's no perfection in creation. The best of understanding, right? And so everything was given to us in the form of raw materials, right? You have land, you have air, you have minerals, you have human brain, right? Everything is raw. It's then for you to process it creatively, and come up with a finished product. What's the finished product? Bottles, phones, cars, planes, lovely houses, technology that works, so you have to, so for them, part of the moral economic core is to take part in that creative process. I must accept and believe that, hey, God has given everything, but it's in a raw form, so you have to go and get it out. You have to reshape, re-engineer, or rather, you have to reshape or re-engine the brain, right? Refocus so that you can then come up with something fantastic. Limited government. You believe that the role of government should be limited. You should allow the accumulation of wealth, process to be released, right? And government should have limited rules. And of course, caring for the needy is an integral part of the economic model. That yes, there could even you want to accumulate wealth, but there could be people that you just can't be entrepreneurs. They just can't make it happen. They are human beings. Yes, they may be vulnerable in one way or the other. They may not, but they just can't do it. In such cases, you care for them. So you can see the balance, a unique balance indeed. From there, I go to the Buddhist moral economic system. I don't want to talk about the man Buddha, who was born in 563 before Christ, very near the Nepalese Indian border, into a royal family. But I think the point is that for him, he was concerned about the cessation of suffering is attainable, that the origin of suffering is attainable, right? He called part of his Four Noble Truths, the path to the cessation of suffering. And then life means suffering. That's the idea. And this was then categorized by writers, such as what we call the Noble Eightfold Path, that's broken down into three main categories of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental development, right? So in other wisdom, we talk about the right view, the right intention. In other ethical conduct, talk about the right speech, right action, right livelihood, right? Other mental development, it covers right efforts, right mindfulness, right concentration. Again, when you look at the Jewish economic model that talks about the fact that you must protect the participation in the creative process. You can see that coming out again, participation in the creative process, right? But in the works of Buddha, is coming out in a unique format, right? Talking about right mindfulness, right
So the
concentration.
Four Noble Truths, um,
Yeah.
I don't know if you would like to talk more on this part. Life means suffering.
So
Life means suffering.
Buddha just took a walk out of the palace. I said, no, I'm not going to enjoy life this way. He just took a walk out. I said, he said to go, just left. For him, he felt that no, for you to be truly devoted to the Creator, you need to suffer. That's his own perception, right? And that origin of suffering
Hmm.
is attached. You have to be attached to suffering. That was the way he perceived it, and that's why he led the luxury life of the palace. And just took a walk. And that suffering is attainable, right? And that path to righteousness is going to come in through suffering. Again, that's where he has perceived it. And so everybody met on the way, on the road, to wherever he was going, he influenced them with his thoughts. And that became, and again, he was preaching morality again, morality, right? But for him, that morality must be, there must be a relationship between morality and suffering. But again, don't forget, he has also covered areas around wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental development, which is also very important. So you can understand the Buddhist, those that follow the Buddhist path. They like to spend time in secluded places. They forget about their wealth. They want to experience, suffering and meditate and focus and rethink. If you like, they want to what's the word now? Meditate deeply. When you meditate deeply, you then get the right solution and all of that. So, yeah, so that's where Buddha perceived that's the foundation of its own moral economic core. I'd like to go quickly into one of my admired philosophers, right? That's Aristotle. Of course, he learned from other great writers and philosophers of his time. He was born in 3084 before Christ, right? Now, let me talk about three major areas of his work. Property is a part of the household. You talk about the art of acquisition, you talk about the nature of money, right? I'd love to concentrate only on the nature of money, but let me start with property as a part of the household. Acquiring property is an essential element of household management, according to Aristotle. Don't forget, a lot of his works were lost. Some say like 90% of his works were lost. Whatever we have is just barely 10% of his works, right? He talked about the fact that the minimum amount of wealth is essential for man to live a good life. He did the minimum, at least something that is minimum. So for him, he wasn't so much following the Buddhist school. For him, he feels that, hey, you must have minimal amount of wealth to be happy, right? If you don't have that minimal wealth, you need to drink clean water, live in fair places, all of that, you're not going to be happy. That good life is a function of having some element of wealth. How do you get that wealth is another question. So let's talk about the art of acquisition. You talk about the fact that it should be retail trade within the context of exchange by barter, which is very common at that time. Which for him is not the natural way of getting wealth. You talk about, he prefers the use of money, which was basically iron, silver, or gold at that time, and which has its own intrinsic value, its own real value. Iron, gold, silver. It has its own intrinsic value, right? For the purpose of exchange or trade rather than barter. So for him, it wasn't so much in favor of trade and barter, but he feels that, hey, no, let's use some medium of exchange, which must have its own value. And that's why we're talking about intrinsic value, intrinsic value. Don't forget that by the time we get into the Islamic economic model, we'll start to see the relationship between that intrinsic value and the way, the Islamic economic system has defined money, right? So now let's move a little bit into the nature of money. Looking at Aristotle's moral economic masterworks, as it's popularly called, right? For him, the most hated self, and worth, the greatest reason is usury, which makes gain out of money itself, and not from the natural object of it. So Aristotle was very clear that it's unnatural, it's hated if you make money from money itself. that is an unnatural way to acquire wealth. When you make money from the sale of money, Aristotle, 3 to 4 years before Christ, right? Now, for him, any money on money is usury, a very unnatural way of getting wealth, right? In the same vein, money should
Even from
indeed.
an Islamic perspective, you can't use money to buy money.
Yes, correct. So at some point, we'll start to then find common grounds in all of these economic models. What is common about all of them, right? Different periods of the world, right? Yes. So let me quickly move to the biblical moral economic, or what we call the biblical moral, or called biblical moral economics, right? I don't want to quote a lot of the Bible, but if you look at Exodus, of course, 22, 24 to 25, I'll just summarize. Thou shalt not be to him as an usurer, either shalt thou lay upon him usury. Right? So just as simple as that. Again, the different, what we call hermeneutics, interpretation, based on whoever is interpreting it, right? Different people have interpreted things in different ways, right? Researchers call that hermeneutics, to give your own interpretation of the text. Yeah, so a lot of interpretation has come here and there. Is it Jew to Jew? Is it Christian to Christian? Is it, and then all of that goes on. But again, it was clearly stated there. And of course, if you look at the works of Thomas Aquinas, which was one of the greatest Christian writers. For him, he argued clearly that money is a measure, or just a measure. Money is just a measure, right? And I usually that falsifies that measure, right? So it's placing extra demand, on the money mechanism, which and its function as a measure. So in other words, money is just a measure. It's a measure of exchange. In other words, measure of exchange. The money itself, should not be engaged in usury. Because some people have tried to define usury and interest, and there's a difference between usury and interest. Like usury is excessive addition, right? And interest is just minimal addition. That's another interpretation. But Thomas Aquinas was clear in his interpretation of the Bible at that time. You have the likes of let's talk about Alexander Lombard. For him, money should not be, you shouldn't use money, in his exact words, right? Money should not be able to be bought and sold, but for a medium. I take it again, right? Alexander Lombard mentioned that money should not be able to be bought or sold, but it should be a medium. Money should just be a medium, right? Again, when you go deeply a little more into the biblical moral economics, what we call the biblical moral economic core, according to Professor Ronnie on the lesson, we describe it as, we call it, there are four ways to repent from unrighteous wealth, right? Number one, restore capital or return the money to the right owners. Number two, make restitution by giving out much more item. You give out the charity, give out a lot, just give it out, right? Number three, you must give to the poor, especially those who are unable to locate, or those who are weak. You can then see a relationship between that and the Jewish economic model, and of course the works of Buddha, right? And number four, now even up capital, due to income or economic inequalities in society. In other words, capital, you need to find ways to close down the gap of inequalities, basically, right? So you even up capital, right? Yes, some people are rich, some people are very poor. Some people are very poor. Some people just need a bit of support. So the wealth must flow from the rich to the poor. And it's on the back of this that great writers emerged. I'm going to talk about some of them. Like Adam Smith and Alfred Marshall and all of these great writers. They learned economics from the Bible. And so they emerged with those moral theories, if you like. And let me quickly swim into the Islamic economic model, which is simple, no interest. You avoid uncertainty, you avoid gambling. Any transaction that looks like gambling, you put down something, you lose everything or you gain everything. Anything that takes that form, right? Any unethical concerns. Again, there's now, call it ijtihad, call it hermeneutics, interpretation by scholars. So this is what we mean by all of these things, right? Again, just like you have in the Bible and so on, where Christian scholars interpret the Bible based on their understanding, right? You also have such, Islam. Now, over time, on the back of this provision of interest, uncertainty, gambling, and so on, scholars have then done a lot of work, especially from the late 1960s, right, into the 1970s, which has then built up what you have today as Islamic economic model in modern time. And then, of course, a subset of it is then the Islamic financial system, right? Again, another good summary of it would be that risk and reward should be shared. It must be asset backed or transaction backed, right? And there has to be justice. Again, you can see justice coming out in the works, in the biblical one and the Jewish one and the works of course, Aristotle, and also Buddha's work. In that quest for justice is integral. But again, to round it up, for the Islamic economic model is Sharia governance. It must be governed by Sharia, or what we call today, when we relate it to banking, we then start to talk about Islamic commercial jurisprudence, right? So that gives a feel of all of the other economic thoughts that emerge over time.
Investing is a powerful tool to build wealth.
Invest smartly by carrying out market research, or rather employ the service of an investment expert.
Be intentional and frequent.
Determination encourages consistent efforts in our long-term financial goals.
Set your financial goals and work towards them.
The best time to start a business or an investment was 20 years ago. The next best time is now.
Working towards your financial goals is like wealth creation opportunities for yourself.
Consistency is the key in growing your financial wealth.
Start early
by growing your investment returns.
Stay diversified by allocating your investment into different asset classes.
Start today with any of our Sharia compliant products.